Hey Computer, Play About Bees podcast.
Well, welcome back, everybody. We're back with another episode of About Bees, Culture, and Curiosity. Today, we are at Worker and Hive in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And your hosts are Ron, that's me, Ron Miksha, and
Bidzina.
Bidzina. Do you have a last name?
I do have a last name. It's very long. We'll leave it out for the next episode.
Okay. So, Bidzina, who do we have on today with us?
Now, in the last episode we posted last week, I said we have someone coming from all the way from BC, but it was virtually. But this week we actually have someone all the way coming from Australia. Victor,
thank you.
Please introduce yourself.
Yes, so I'm Victor Croker. I'm a commercial beekeeper from Australia, third generation commercial beekeeper, and I'm also the founder and CEO of Hive IQ.
So we're going to talk a lot about Hive IQ. That's really the reason you're up here right now, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly right. So I'm around doing a round of trade shows and presenting our new hive, the hive that's something that's evolved over the last 10 plus years.
So I want to dig into your Hive IQ and see how high your Hive IQ is.
Great. Yes.
So there'll be lots of questions.
Looking
But first, we really want to get a little bit of your background because I think you're our first Aussie here to be interviewed. Do people get offended when we call you Aussies?
Not at all. It's what we call ourselves. It's good to go.
Okay, good to go. So Victor, tell us a little bit. Like you have been in the bees for
Yes.
third generation, did you say?
Yeah, third generation commercial beekeeper. My grandmother started our family in commercial beekeeping in the Riverina area in Australia, where all the food. It's a food bowl of Australia. And during the war, she couldn't get work. It was pretty tough back then, and she discovered beekeeping, and she ended up running around 150 hives around the orchards and the crops around the Griffith area in New South Wales, Australia. And so, she used to shift her bike around on a bicycle, so, back in the good old days. Then, of course, my dad and my uncle picked it up and ran with it, and then I grew up in bees. So I grew up with honey running through my veins almost.
And they had a commercial outfit by the time you were even a kid then?
That's right, yeah. When I grew up into a family of about my dad had 2,500 hives around about. And so, from when I was a young kid, 4 or 5 years old and up, I'd try to skip school. I'd have my little suitcase packed. My dad used to be leaving to go out on the bees on a Monday morning or a Sunday afternoon for the week, and I'd be waiting in the truck with my suitcase and trying to hide under the seat wherever I could. I just love getting out there and
rather than go to school.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, what would you choose, beekeeping or school? But
yeah, I guess anybody would choose the bees over the school. I mean, what's going to happen out in the bee yard in Australia? A few bee stings, a few snakes, being away from home for a week, but that would be fun.
It was awesome as a 5-year-old through to teenager. Every school holidays, I was out on the bees. I'd as soon as I could carry a frame of honey, I was on the uncapping machine, lifting the frames into the uncapping machine.
That's very, it's unique for a 5-year-old because we think that they like bugs and they're interested in these sorts of topics. But every time I talk to one, they're afraid of bees. They don't like bees. Kids don't really like bees.
Well, I guess when I was really young, getting stung wasn't fun.
Right.
Now I do it just for my arthritis.
Sorry, what do you mean? What do you mean by that?
It's kind of a joke. So I do get stung a lot. I guess I'm a bit lazy. I don't like wearing gloves, and even today, these days I don't put a bee suit on. If I get a couple of stings here and there, then that's not enough to put a bee suit on. I probably should, but. And of course, sometimes the bees are just a little bit over the top, and you don't have any choice. You're going to put the bee suit on, but I just love being out in the bees.
But is there any scientific evidence behind helping arthritis, or is that
no? It's just I'm just
because I've heard that before too. There's all sorts of things that bee stings help with.
I think there probably is some science behind it, but it just was my joke. But I think potentially bee venom, it's I know people do harvest bee venom these days, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure about the science of it.
Yeah, you don't need to harvest it when you've got thousands of colonies of bees to go out and look at.
Yeah,
Barehanded, and probably your veil off part of the time too.
part of the time, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's just a thing.
So I want to back up just a little bit, and you had 25. They had, your uncle and your father had 2,500 colonies of
Right.
bees when
Right.
you were a young chap. Now I'm guessing that would put you maybe. I hope I'm not getting these numbers too far off, but let's say somewhere in the 1970s or so.
Yep.
And in those days, more than 1,000 colonies of bees was a really big outfit.
Right,
So,
yeah.
so these were big-time beekeepers.
It's in the 1970s, yes, that would have been. I was born in 1968, so when I was 5 in the 70s, right through the 80s,
Yes.
90s. I was, full-time professional beekeeper from when I was 14, and
Now, you mentioned sneaking on even as a young lad, even before you were 14 years old.
Right.
So sneaking into the truck for a week at a time, did that mean they were migrating, moving bees across Australia?
We did a lot of migrating. So beekeeping in Australia is a very migratory intensive beekeeping practice. There's very few parts of Australia where we can really sustain a stationary operation. Our flora and fauna environment is very feast or famine. So eucalyptus, we've got around 800 species of eucalyptus, and that's one of our big honey sources for Australian beekeepers. But it's an interesting tree. It's obviously a tree, and very few of them flower every year, right? So usually they're on a cycle of every 1 to 5 years, the flowering cycle, and it depends a lot on things like rainfall and the like. Yeah, so you've got to almost be a botanist to be a beekeeper in Australia and really understand that flora and when it's going to bud up and flower and so forth.
Yeah. So you were producing a lot of honey. You saw this happening when you were a youngster, and I'm assuming that you were mostly in those days using the standard Langstroth style boxes with 9 or 10 frames in them, and stacking up 4, 5, 6 deep supers during the honey flow to.
No. Well, yes to the first part. Yes, we ran a 8-frame Langstroth. My dad had Langstroth 8-frame. We never really get above a 3-story hive, so three deep supers, 3 full depth, we call them in Australia. And the bottom box is always our brood box in Australia.
So a single brood box.
Single brood box is always,
and you could harvest the top 2 boxes off of that.
Yeah, correct, yeah.
Well, then you were cycling boxes through a few times if you had a really good flow going on.
That's right. So we get on a cycle where we take the top super when the middle box is about half to 2/3 full. So that kind of determines when we harvest the honey super off the top. We take the top off, we remove the bees with usually a leaf blower, or we can use escape boards and other things, but we take and we put them on the truck and we lift the middle box up and put a wet and freshly extracted super underneath.
And they jumped right
above
back up there.
Yeah, and so what it gives us the bees always have space, so above the brood chamber, when they look up, they always see space, so they don't feel crowded. So it's a technique to try to minimise swarming traits. But it also means that if the honey flow suddenly stops due to bad weather or for whatever, a heat wave, then our bees always have that at least a 2/3 super honey sitting on top, even if we've only just harvested.
Right.
And so we never leave our bees. We never come along. Well, sometimes, very occasionally, we might take both supers if it's a huge honey flow and we just can't keep up, and we know that we've got a good runway ahead of us. We've got good weather for the next 2 weeks. We know the bees are going to be full, so it's really a rare occasion where we would take all the honey off in one go. So we always leave that honey on. Like I said, it minimises swarming for us, and it keeps the bees working too. So when the bees look up and see capped honey above them, they get their deck chairs, they put them out the front, and they start to sun themselves. They have a holiday.
Yeah, of course.
And really, and I think there's science behind that too, where the bees will slow down if they feel like they're just about accomplished their goal.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
We had a very well-known beekeeper in Saskatchewan with a PhD in entomology, and he was running, in those days, same time that you're talking about, close to 2,000 colonies of bees. And I heard him speak once, and he said if he were king of the world, one law that he would make is that all beekeepers have to own 1 more super than they already own for each hive. so that there was that space. Because otherwise, just as you described there, Victor, they're going to be on vacation if they get crowded.
Yeah.
So here our crop comes in a very short period of time, 2 or 3 months maximum.
Right.
Sometimes 6 weeks, we make 200 or 300 pounds of honey. Now yours is spread out a little more than that?
Spread out, mostly spread out more than what I'm hearing in your climate here. Your bees fill up super fast. You've also got long days.
Long days.
Longer days.
Yeah.
I mean, in summer our days are quite long, but I think you've got probably at least 6 hours more daylight.
Right.
In a 24-hour period for the bees.
Right.
It all contributes to fast filling.
Yep.
I think in your climate. We have got some nectar, like our river red gums, our eucalyptus trees. That honey comes out of the tree really dense, and so they'll fill a 3-story hive in about 3 days, 4 days. As my dad and I have seen it.
That's 20 pounds a day.
Yeah, so we can get that, but it's not that common. Usually, most of our honey flows will take a week to 2 weeks to fill the super.
Right.
So we've got a little bit more time.
Yeah.
And are you getting a wide variety of mix, or is it, because here normally we are only maybe getting 5 or 6, like 80% of the honey is maybe out of 5 or 6 different crops, from what I understand, from the big crops.
So how many honey crops do we have in a year? Is that what you're asking?
Like in that 20 pounds of honey, that would be, well, not in a day, but like in a honey harvest.
Okay.
How many crops of honey?
It's a very monoculture. Often, well, not always. So sometimes we could have canola crop in the background somewhere, and we could have eucalyptus and some other things flowering. But if we're in Australia, a lot of our forests, even though we've got 800 species of eucalyptus, a lot of them are very monoculture. So we'll go into an area where it's predominantly river red gum, and we're on the rivers, and we might go into the high country, and there could be 30 species of eucalyptus within flight range of our apiaries, but there's only one flowering.
But only 1 or 2 are flowering.
Only 1 or 2 are flowering. Like snow gums would be up in our alpine region.
And the color and texture, I guess more of the texture and color of the honey. What is the most common in Australia that you're getting? Is more darker or lighter?
Well, there's no two the same. So of those species, there's a huge number of eucalypts we have. They range from light and very sort of smooth flavour right through to very dark and almost bitter, like a real strong, with a lot of kick in the flavour. So they vary a lot in colour and flavour.
Which one goes for higher price?
There's a handful of honeys in Australia that are famous, like our yellow box, our coolabah, river red gums, and they're kind of seen as super smooth. They're like kind of when you get a nice bottle of Merlot or Shiraz, you've got that beautiful smooth flavour, and it appeals to more palates. And then we have the other extreme that are, for example, our tea tree or our Manuka style honeys are really dark and don't appeal to that many people.
And are people very particular about their honey in Australia, where I'm only eating this type of, or no, whatever honey I can get?
No, they are. Yes, people get to know their honeys in Australia, and it's really interesting. The Australian palate over a couple hundred years has evolved to like those eucalyptus honeys. So I know when we go to the US and we bring our honey, the Honey Pack is a family that we supply to in Australia. Jody and Steve Goldsworthy. Jody and Steve were here in the US, over in the US with our honeys, and it didn't appeal to the palate of the US citizen because you've evolved your palate to like canola and it's a sweet palate. And eucalyptus honey is probably a bit less sweet than.
It's less sweeter, huh?
Yeah.
Because people have complained that honey is. The honey they're like, I'm sorry, I love what you're doing, but I don't eat honey. It's too sweet for me.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So you could, So I guess it's a bit like wine. Like I use that reference. You get dry and sweet. So and honey's similar. I wouldn't say it goes dry. It all has a sweetness to it, but it just has a different kick to it.
I think that's one of the neatest things about honey is that depending on the climate, the type of flowers, the part of the world, there's such an incredible variety, and certain varieties appeal to different people. But I want to move on a little bit from these box hives, the 8-frame Langstroth style that your family had operated. And at some point along the way, and I'm guessing relatively recently, you decided that you can do better,
We did.
Yes.
So I had a few years break from beekeeping, and I went and worked in another industry, big IT. So I worked for Adobe and more HP, but I was tricked back into beekeeping in 2010.
Oh, that would be quite the trick.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got tired of squinting into the screens? Is that what happened?
So shout out to my business partner Dave Lemus for tricking me into getting into beekeeping.
Okay.
Sorry, could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah.
I know it's a joke, but
Yeah, it's a funny story, but his daughter and my daughter were both doing the ballet together. They were young girls, and him and I were meeting at the front of the ballet school, and as per normal, the ballet teachers always ran over, so we were out the front chatting. And we ended up building props in his garage for our daughter's end of year ballet concert.
Right.
And then my dad dobbed me in to Dave and said, told him that I was a commercial beekeeper. And then Dave's going, I've always wanted to be a commercial beekeeper, but I never had a family connection or knowledge, and was always just too afraid to take that step. And so we started drinking a fine bottle of port one night, and and one thing led to another, and he said to me, can we start some beehives? And I go, sure. And I was thinking, okay, he wants to do it as a hobby. So I said, we can get 4 or 5 hives. And he's going, and he looked disappointed. And he said, I was kind of thinking at least a couple of hundred. And I'm going, you want to go commercial? Anyway, I thought about it for a really long time. It was probably 5 minutes. And then I said, all right, let's do it.
You were ready to jump off the screen and back out into the field.
What I'll say about bees, and I think it gets into your blood, beekeeping, and it never leaves. And I feel with bees, there's a connection between my bees and my soul. Like I feel, when you pop the lid on a hive, and you look in the hive, and they're whitening up, they're beautiful, they're comfortable, it's good for your soul. But when you pop the lid and they're cold, clustered, there's water raining down on them from the condensation, there's mold growing on the wall comb, it's just not good, and it really affects your day and your week.
Yeah. Right, and then you also feel very disappointed in yourself because you're letting a living thing down.
Absolutely. It's kind of like my
pet
pet dog. Like if I left it out and it's very white and cold out there, if I had it tied out to that tree back out there, I'd be, it's kind of, I feel that same connection and responsibility.
And would any of that kind of the feelings kind of led you to develop this box?
Yeah, so in 2010, it was when we first started it, Dave and I, we thought, we'll go and buy some equipment. So we went and bought all new, flat packed, wooden 10 frame Langstroth, put it all together. We bought some packaged bees, put them in there in the spring, and then came winter, and we went down to check our bees, and it was a really wet winter that year, and I can show you some images, maybe I can give you, but I looked in the hive and thought, what are we doing here? This is nuts. The bees were clustered up. There was mold starting to form on the wall combs of the brood box.
Now this is in Australia.
Yeah.
See, most of us here would never picture cold, wet, rainy, moldy conditions anywhere in Australia.
Oh no, we don't get obviously as cold as you do here, but we get down to about minus 5 Celsius.
Mm-hmm.
It ever snow in
the Alpine, definitely in the Alpine region.
Right, yeah.
We call it, I guess you call it our snowy mountains. We call it, but our Alpine region, and we do overwinter sometimes in those regions. But yeah, so the bees are cold, and I said to my business partner Dave, this is just nuts. We've got to find a better way. We have to give our hives insulation. So, we live in an insulated home, so why are we forcing these little critters to live here in this crap hole, So, so that kind of started. So I started doing some research, and I said to Dave, I've been working in big IT for the last few years, and I didn't even think to just do some proper research. I just jumped in and did the same old thing that everybody does. So I felt really like I'd let myself down. So I started doing some research. I discovered that insulation has been used in the Europe and the Scandinavian areas since the 70s. We started testing hives, and we were testing plastic and EPS, expanded polystyrene hives, and we ended up deciding to set up 2 apiaries. So we imported from Europe. We imported 120 complete hives, and we set them across 2 apiaries. So we had 2 apiaries of 120, and we had 60 of each on each apiary were 10-frame Langstroth, and 60 were these 10-frame EPS hives.
Right.
And so we started, and it wasn't a science project. We were just trying to work out what's best for our bees. So we weren't running, we weren't doing a proper scientific study, but we were keeping data on our whiteboard in our extracting room, on how much honey was coming in off these hives. We quickly discovered that insulation really, really matters for healthy, productive bees. We actually, within an hour, we put our bees, we moved the 60 across in winter, so we had this canopy because it was misting rain, and we were swapping them across into these new hives, and we'd go back and pop the lid in an hour later,
Right.
and we could see within an hour it was a high five moment. Like, we thought, this is, how good is this? Our bees look within an hour so much better. Yeah.
That's incredible. And sorry, Ron, go ahead. You had
No, that's really good. There's a good line there to follow, and that is, you obviously thought that these are good, but they could be even better.
Yeah, so the issues we had was a few issues we had, because as a commercial migratory beekeeper, 2 things: form factor. Well, we have to fit a certain amount of hives on the truck. We move long distances. We
Right.
can't have a bulky hive and reduce the amount of hives we can carry.
And the ones out of Europe tend to be bulky.
They're bulky, yeah.
Yes.
And durability. So durability and functionality for
And the
for
ones out of
commercial.
Europe, again, can chip very easily.
Yeah, so not enough sort of durability built in, and they tend to be a bit more fragile, and they'll damage easy with the hive tool and the like. And
Yes.
if you bump them, they'll break. And so we had to deal with that. So it just started as, but we knew we had to do this. We were. We became obsessed with the fact that we have to make this work for our bees. We have to, and so we started to come up with different ideas and designs. We fixed the form factor. That was easy. We decided we did the numbers and worked out if we dropped 1 frame, went from a 10 frame back to a 9 frame, we could retain the insulation thickness on the walls and then fit on the truck.
And then fit on the truck.
And of course,
yeah.
in 10 frame, we were running 9 frames anyway, so it wasn't really a big change at all. So that worked really well. Then we just started to
Do they
work on
tend
the
to
design.
load 8 foot wide on the deck of a truck?
Yeah, so our maximum road width in Australia is 2.5 metres.
Okay.
And so we run our hives on pallets of 4
Yes.
hives per pallet, 3 pallets wide on the truck. You can see here on this hive. This is a 2 hive stand, so this is kind of more the hobbyist version, but or small commercial sideliner version. But our pallet, we use the same style of pallet as this one here. You see, with 4 hives, with a strap around each of the 2 hives.
I'll get up, and while you describe it, I could kind of take it apart if you like.
Sure, yeah, you can do that. And so...
Okay, for people who are just simply listening to the podcast, what we're doing is we've got a complete setup of some colonies without the bees inside of Worker and Hive's showroom, and Bettina is going to open up an example hive so we can get a sense for the size, the proportion, and how everything sticks together. So it's entirely EPS.
Yeah,
correct?
so expanded polystyrene, but ultra high density. Very unusually high density. So normally polystyrene's used in packaging and insulation
It's
construction.
almost soft that way.
Yeah, so it's soft to touch. You can poke your fingernail into
Right.
it, and it's soft.
And this you won't poke your finger through.
You can't afford to have a soft product inside a beehive, because naturally bees want to excavate soft material, because they're trying to dig out that soft material and get to the hard surface of, say, the inside of a tree cavity, where they can then line it with propolis.
Right.
So it has to be super hard, really hard, and high fusion strength.
Do you mind talking about the rim, the inner rim that...
Yeah, the inner rim that you see there on the hive top is again for durability and also pest protection. And so with EPS, other bugs like EPS as well as bees, because it's very inert, it's a very stable temperature. So if you've got any little crack, the bees, things like ants will come in there and set up their lay their eggs, And so that hard plastic edge helps us with pest protection, wax moth and the like coming through, but it gives us a protective edge for the hive tool. So.
And you have a kind of a female that connects with the male
Right.
perfectly aligned.
And that interlocking design, and that's nothing new, and that's not our design. I mean, there's plenty of interlocking hives out there, but it's a very important feature. A very important feature because for commercial beekeeping, especially when we're transporting hives, one of the challenges you have with a standard Langstroth hive without interlocking is when they're transporting, they get bumped. The boxes will move back and forth, and then you get problems with robbing. If you're out in the apiary and you've got a stack of supers, for example, and the boxes aren't sealed, all your honey will be robbed out. So that interlocking design makes it so much better for handling and transport. But it's also a weather strip. If you can think about driving rain coming in on that hive. The water would have to run uphill to get over that interlocking design. Mm-hmm. So it's a dry hive. So as we all know, wet bees are dead bees. So we want to keep water out of our hives, excessive water. And so that interlocking design has multiple benefits.
And the edges are beveled as well. So that might also help with the water running off.
Exactly, yeah. And if you have a look on the inner edge, that top inner edge, you'll see there's a very fine 45-degree chamfer, you could call it. Right. Now that's deliberate, because what we want here is what we discovered is the closer we get to a tree cavity style of environment, and that is airtight chamber except for the lower entrance, the more productive and healthier our bees. So we put that little edge there so the bees have a small space where they can seal the hive with a very small amount of propolis and create that airtight cavity.
See, I just kind of want to show all the interlocking.
Right.
So what's happening here right now is Bedzina has 3 units, 3 rims, 2 deeps and a shallow, and he's shaking them back and forth, left and right, and it's staying together very well because of the grooves that are designed into the product that keeps things from shifting. So if you were loading this in the back of a truck, you probably wouldn't have anywhere near you would not have anywhere near the issues that you could have with regular boxes shifting around when they're stacked up.
Yeah, so for storage, handling, and transport, it's really good for that.
Your bottom lid is a very unique design as well. Could you please kind of talk?
The hive base, yes. So we're trying to mimic the tree cavity idea. So in a tree cavity, bees like to adjust their entrance, but typically they often have a smaller entrance than we would traditionally give them in a Langstroth hive. So we designed a 3-stage entrance, so the beekeeper can close down to 1/3 entrance size for periods of the season when the bees need to be able to defend their hive against robber bees or yellow jackets, or in Australia we have European wasps, and so that gives the ability for us to shut down the entrance to small and then open it back up in increments of 1/3 to a full flow if we've got a really big nectar flow and we want to give the bees maximum throughput.
And they're on magnets, huh?
Yeah, that's right. It's our industrial designer, John, he got quite creative with how we latch the thing together and building. He did a great job of, the locking mechanism.
So it's magnetic.
The center door is held in place with little magnets, and then you'll see on each side of the entrance you'll see the 2 locks. Now the reason we want to be able to lock the entrance down, and the reason for that is when we're driving down the road. Right. We don't want that entrance to blow closed because we transport our bees open entrance.
Right.
So we lock the entrance open, or we can lock it closed. So those locks are.
Sorry, so they go.
You just spin them around.
Oh, you spin them around.
Right, like that.
And wow, it's like, so these parts are you guys 3D print these in house?
Those are injected molded.
Okay, they're very well made.
Yes, they're all high quality injection molding using UV stable. The technical term, I think, glass filled nylon, glass-infused nylon. Excuse me if I'm not using the right terminology, John, but yeah. So so but what we do have is we have 3D printer in our design.
I just want to say that pivoting mechanism.
Right.
Really nice.
Yes,
it locks in there.
Yes.
It's locked. It won't move, and then there's
Yeah.
a nice little lock there.
So there's an enormous.
You guys really thought about everything.
Right. Yes. It's just an enormous amount of design thought and energy that we've put into the design of all the aspects of the hive. So if you look, we moved back in the hive into that black plate that you see there, the first plate. That's actually just a blanking plate. What we have is an optional pollen collection, pollen
great.
trap
system
that drops into there, and then a latch mechanism that mounts up underneath, and then the beekeeper can. I think the one next to you there has the pollen collector, but just this one.
Pull it out, or?
Yeah. So if you see that knob at the front of the hive there, you just turn that 180 degrees. That's that one. Rob's got a problem with this one. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, I see. The whole thing comes.
No. Yeah.
So you have a white tray just pulled out, and that could serve as a sticky board to see if you've got varroa mite falling onto it?
Yep.
Right.
So we have sticky board. You can spray that with something and
some
create a
oils
sticky
or something.
board. But it's a winter board also, so you can slide that in there.
To keep it from being quite as cold on the ground.
If you have a look under the one that you've pulled off the pallet, you'll see some rails there.
Yeah, it's a drawer. It's a little drawer mechanism that is pretty tight, and that's very good.
Yeah, and that's the pollen collector drawer that you just removed. So then you so those yellow rails, that goes with the pollen collector. So
this goes with the pollen collector.
No, the metal tray goes with the pollen collector, so you can leave that off.
Okay.
Yeah, that hive hasn't even got a pollen collector installed, but you can see there.
Is this just for shipping?
No.
That's for winter as well.
It's your winter board, but you can also use it as a sticky board if you're doing might drop.
I'm holding it not leveled, so.
But
yeah, you could put it whichever position you like.
No.
It would need to be near the entrance where the pollen's coming in with the bees.
You align that drawer underneath
Right.
the pollen.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. But the hive that you're looking at there, it doesn't have the pollen collector installed.
Going crazy.
Yeah.
Let me put this down and then sit back in the chair.
Yeah.
So when you are expecting a farmer to be using sprays, some pesticides, you can completely close the entrance, but still have air coming in through the bottom.
Yeah, so vented mesh floor or perforated aluminium if you're
aluminum is fine in Canada. Yeah.
Floor for ventilation.
Mm-hmm.
And
a completely closable entrance.
Yes.
And also, if you've got a severe attack of those European wasps, that
you can close it down. Then we have an optional pollen collection system. So the one that's not supposed to happen.
Okay.
Yeah. I should have changed that because I've got the new one in the car, but anyway.
So the pollen trapping then, does it completely preclude any bees from getting in any direction except through the pollen trap?
Yes,
so when the pollen trap is on, all the bees have to go through the pollen trap.
Yep.
So you'd use that intermittently then, obviously.
Absolutely, yeah.
But
so if you're a hobbyist and you wanted to harvest some pollen for your smoothies, you might switch it on in the morning once a week, or depending on the
right.
You need a good pollen flow.
Yes.
And you want to just harvest a percentage of the pollen and leave the rest for the bees. So you just put it on for a few hours.
Yes.
And then switch it off with that lever, and pull the tray out, and then you can go and use that pollen.
Yes.
You can either store it for future to feed back to your colonies in the future during tougher times, hard times, or you can use it for your own consumption.
No, it looks absolutely beautiful. It's a very nice style, a really, really nice style.
Thanks.
You recommend people paint this EPS?
Absolutely. I mean, you build a new house, you paint it, right? So you should paint the outside, the UVs, it'll give it UV protection. The EPS product as such is really long life. So one of the benefits of this hive versus what we had in our wooden hives our wooden hives had a very limited lifespan unless we put a lot of time and money into treatments. We dip them in chemicals like copper naphthenate, or we dip them into like a paraffin type waxes.
Paraffin at least,
so it adds a lot of cost to the timber hive. But even then, we found that the modern timbers, the fast-growing pines, have a limited life. When you paint this hive, because it's such a stable product, use a high-quality acrylic house paints, water-based, and we normally apply 2 coats, but it has a very, very long life to paint as well because the product is stable. It doesn't move, it doesn't crack like a wooden box, wooden hive box. So we don't have moisture getting underneath the paint. So it's if you take your time and paint it 2 coats of high-quality paint, probably the next time you'll need to paint it is probably at least 15 years. Whereas on our wooden hives, we'd have to paint them about every 4 or 5 because of the cracking and the moisture getting under the paint.
Could you also dip it in wax or foam? No, that's hot temperatures.
Yeah,
it's going to melt wax.
It's not required.
Yeah,
not required.
It's going to melt styrofoam.
The inside, though, we let the bees do the painting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what we found early on in our studies was when we left the inside raw, like natural EPS, the bees like to fill in their little granules. Even though we can't see it with our physical eye, they fill in all the little gaps between the bead, and it becomes a very smooth, painted interior, so fully lined in propolis.
But they don't dig into that. The bees don't tunnel
they
out.
They don't. And the reason they don't is because we've got minimum density and fusion strength. Mm-hmm. And so they see it as the internal of a tree cavity, for example, or a wooden hive. They see that as that's the surface. Let's paint it now with propolis.
Right.
Is your team researching evolutions in styrofoam technology or innovations in styrofoam technology and how it could be better made? Because I think the styrofoam technology, it's kind of been, everyone's kind of using the same styrofoam, right?
Yes. Yeah. So we do a lot of collaborative research. We work with Macquarie University in Sydney, Australia. We work with Professor Teo and Andy Barron there, and we've been working on our technology and sensor technology, so collecting data out of the beehive, like temperature, humidity, also external to the beehive. So we're working on the technical side of beekeeping and understanding all that data that's coming in, and then developing algorithms. So that's on predicting things like colony, which direction the colony is going. Is it on a trajectory in a good way or a bad way?
Yeah.
And is it going to collapse in 4 to 6 weeks, or what that might look like? We also do research. We're doing research with University of Leeds with Derek Mitchell, Dr. Derek Mitchell in England, in the UK. Yes. So, and that's more about evolving the hive design and looking at what is the optimal amount of insulation in the top of the hive. How much ventilation should we have? What should the entrance design be? So we're always looking for ways to improve.
Is there any work being done currently to try to advance this type of material, this construction material, to even make it even better, or is it kind of at its peak right now?
I would say potentially things like UV stabilizations is probably an option. Maybe color, infusing with color.
Right.
Different levels of fireproofing. There are other things like that going on, but for us, we find the product is near perfect. For colony hives, the bees see it as a natural fibre, I believe, because it's zero off-gassing. And so in the hive, it's super clean for the bees. They like the texture. It's always a stable temperature. So, you can put your hand on a piece of polystyrene that's been sitting out on a 45-degree day, and you won't burn your hand.
Right.
It's stable. You can if you put it out here today in about minus 13 or something.
Something like that right now. Yes.
So
Celsius.
if we put a piece of styrene out there for a couple of hours and go out and pick it up, it's not going to stick to our hand because it's cold like a piece of metal would.
Yeah.
Or it's very stable temperature, and the bees like it.
Okay, so the material obviously has been thought about and considered to a large extent, and you've got what is probably the best available for this purpose right now.
Right.
And we can always expect some chemists to be developing something a little
Sure.
more in the future. But meanwhile, you have a brilliant hive here. It's a 2.5 story that we're looking at. The only thing that I see quite different from what I personally would be using, and I want you to talk about this, address this subject to some extent. The only thing I see that's missing is I would have an upper entrance to eliminate more moisture. But I understand that your design takes care of the condensation fairly well. Could you go into that?
Yeah, sure. So condensation was one of the problems we saw and that we were trying to solve. And we were, over those 4 years we did study, we tried lots of different configurations, and what we discovered is we don't want any top entrance. Top vent or top entrance. What we want is high levels of insulation and a sealed cavity.
Okay.
So what happens then is, because bees need a few things, they need high humidity, they need obviously the temperature to be right, they need CO, they operate really well in high CO2, and the research is early days, but and
That's
pressure.
wild. High CO2, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, and pressure. So Derek's paper that he published last year, Dr. Derek Mitchell, talks about pressure, how potentially that could be quite an important feature of a hive design, because naturally the bees are producing highly humid, warm air. It's rising, hitting the ceiling of the hive, and in a non-insulated environment or a poorly insulated environment, the surface temperatures are below dew point, and that's when we get condensation forming.
It starts raining inside the hive.
That's right. But in a tree cavity, it's so warm, and they build up warmth. It's a large thermal mass. It holds the warmth, and the bees have to do very minimal work to keep it warm. And when that warm air rises, it hits the ceiling, and it's consistently being pushed by more air. And as it cools, it drops down around the outside of the colony. And as it leaves the hive, and it's down the bottom of the hive and below the cluster, when it first comes in contact with any surface that's below dew point, it starts to condensate. And that's important because bees also need hydration. Even in Canada here, where it's minus 40, it's a very dry environment. So the bees still need access to hydration.
Right.
And sorry, you mentioned that they do better in high levels of CO2.
The research is showing, I think bees can comfortably live in an environment of around 7%, is what I've read. And I think the research is still ongoing in early days. But I believe varroa mites, however, don't like anything above about 5%. So there could be a magic bullet. It's a potential magic bullet if we give the bees a sealed cavity where they can absolutely manage their CO2 levels and get them higher than the mites can tolerate. I think already we're seeing in some of the sheds where warehouses where they actually pushing CO2 into the environment and seeing larger mite drop. So that's potentially a magic bullet that we could see from this design.
Because that's a big debate in the beekeeping community here about whether to have multiple entrances or a single entrance, and we still haven't come to a conclusion.
Right. The upper entrance is trying to solve the condensation problem. But it's creating a lot of problems for the bees, I believe, because we're actually taking away control of the environment from the bees. Because imagine the bees trying to maintain pressure, CO2, humidity, and we've just completely eliminated the bees' ability, the colony's ability to manage that, because now all of the CO2, humidity is leaving the hive at the top of the hive. And often you'll see if you put top screen vents, or we used to see it all the time in our wooden hives. We used to have round holes in the lids on the sides with mesh on them.
Right.
And the bees would propolis those over.
Okay.
And they don't want it. What we've observed is that bees do not want top ventilation. I think the research is still out. I mean, there could be potential for opening a top entrance on a big nectar flow, and I've spoken to a lot of beekeepers in Canada who like a top entrance, but our research, our experience is that no top entrance is what we run with.
Now, I kind of can't recall, to be honest with you, the brand of the other styrofoam, the boxes that are made, but I believe they have a feature where you can have a vent, upper vent. Yours don't, and And
Yep.
specifically because that's you guys don't believe in upper entrance.
We haven't seen
Right.
that benefits the colony at all. In fact,
see.
the opposite. And we have the other climate we have in Australia is our summer climate is extremely hot. So we operate in, like you call it, the outback.
Yeah.
Central to Western New South Wales, and almost we're out in the desert type environment. Really hot, 45 degrees is quite common, Celsius that is. And what we discovered is with our hives is if we keep the no vents in the top, just a vented floor, we get very little if no bearding compared to our wooden hives, and the bees are able to work throughout the entire day, continue foraging. Whereas in our wooden hives, what we found is they would be bearded up to the top of almost to the top of the third box under, and I've got some images that I can share with you showing the contrast. And so the bees are not working when they're bearded out the front, and the brood is subject to high temperatures, so potentially the brood is dying.
Let's do a quick definition of your term beaded.
Bearded.
Yes.
So it's maybe my accent, but bearded as in like a beard of bees, like
Bearded.
Right.
So
Bearded.
we would say bearded. You would say beaded. I'm going to
Bearded.
learn Australian by the time we're
Yeah.
done here.
It's
So-
funny because it sounded bearded fine for
Yes?
me on the headphones here.
Right.
That might be my
because-
ears then.
Because he was
the bearding
speaking
is-
this way and then
Right.
But what is bearding exactly? Because there's a lot of listeners. I mean, even some beekeepers don't really know what's going on.
So
Why do they do
bearding-
that?
I call it a beard because it's literally like a beard on your face. It's like a big, but it's made of bees, and it hangs out. They hang out the front of the hive from the entrance, and the reason they do it mostly is because when the internal temperature of the hive goes above about 35 degrees, the brood will die. And so and the body temperature, just the body temperature of 40, 50,000 bees living in a hive in really hot conditions, can cook the brood, can just overheat the hive. So what they do is they just start moving out of the hive.
Right.
They'll be fanning as well, and they're basically preserving the internal temperature of the hive. So
And what you've experienced is taking away the upper entrance helps them with that. They're
in an insulated hive,
in an insulated hive.
not in a wooden hive.
Not in a wooden hive.
Well,
They
not
would
in
need
not
to
in
go
a
for
non-insulated hive. Whether it's wood or not, it doesn't matter. But it's because so what we found is when we were doing we had our research for between 2011 and 2015, we had the two apiaries. We had bees on a honey flow in the outback. It was a river red gum flow, and the temperatures were 47 degrees for about 10 days straight.
Oh,
and
man.
it was not only hot, but it was blowing a hot wind.
Yes.
And so we thought, well, we've kind of wasted our diesel moving bees out here because there's no way the bees are going to be able to work in this environment. But
Well, the flowers too would be getting dried out awfully quickly.
Yeah.
But you're working mostly with trees, so there's
Eucalyptus
probably
trees.
enough moisture coming up.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Even in that really hot, dry weather.
Right.
So you're going to tell us they made a bumper crop anyway.
so we had the 60 wooden hives and the 60 EPS hives on each site. We stopped at the apiary when we pulled in. With the bearding on the wooden hives was excessive.
Again, that's the word bearding, folks.
Bearding. So they were it was excessive. There were bees hanging right to the top of the third
On
box.
the wooden hives.
On the wood, and actually, if the sun was hitting the front, the beard would move around the corner and be in the shade of the. So it was crazy. But then
Wow.
we looked at our EPS hives, and there was no bearding. The bees were flying in and out. So we at first thought, well,
No, they're all dead.
Yeah, that's what we actually did.
I
We thought-
would. I mean, that
we
would be
thought,
my
wow,
first thought.
the bees aren't the bees.
Yeah.
Maybe we've cooked them. The
Yeah.
insulation has been
But
too much.
No.
So we went over to our hives. We popped the lid on our EPS hives. The bees were healthy, spread evenly across the top box, working,
Not stressed.
not stressed, putting nectar, and we put our hand in underneath the lid, and it was cool.
Oh,
So
wow.
really cool.
That's great.
And the bees had drawn whole boxes, because back then we had all new equipment. They'd drawn out a whole box, like 9 frames of foundation, filled it with honey and capped it. Wow. So then we went over to our wooden hives who weren't using they didn't have
Right.
foundation, they had drawn comb.
Right.
They hadn't put any honey in.
Even
and
in the drawn comb.
no, they
They
hadn't
were
put-
too busy trying to keep
stay
things cool.
Stay cool. And so we popped the lid, and there was virtually no bees in the top box, the top super.
Yeah.
They're all
Because
outside.
They were all outside.
Wow.
But the hive beetles were there, by the way. So
They were probably having a
You have hive beetles down there.
Oh, yeah, we'd have hive beetles.
they were probably having a party, huh? No bees. it's just
Exactly.
all
So,
beetle.
we can talk about hive beetles. Maybe we'll get onto that, and I'll explain the difference in how hive beetles affect these hives. But just to finish on this, so the bees hadn't done any work in the wooden hives. They hadn't put any honey in the 10 days, and they'd lost population. So clearly they'd gone backwards. The wax under the lid was at melting point,
Right.
almost melting.
Oh, yeah.
And so the hives, but then we pulled the hives apart and had a look at the brood frames, and in the wooden hives they were full of water. You shake the frame and it was just
Right. They're trying to cool this off. They're trying
Yeah.
to create a refrigerator in there.
That's right. And what we saw any bees that were leaving the wooden hives were flying to the river nearby, which was the Murrumbidgee River. And we went and checked the EPS hives, and they were flying to the trees. They were foraging in 47-degree temperature. So what it told us was that bees they could work in high temperatures. They could fly and forage in high temperatures. But when they come home, if they can't go in the hive because they're going to cook their brood, then they've got to be. There's no other option for them.
Well, this is fantastic. So you're solving several problems all at once, and I think that people who are in these really hot, dry climates are really going to appreciate something like this. So I'd like to touch on just a little bit of your factory, how long you've been doing it, and then we might segue from there into how you're distributing and how people can get a hold of this equipment anywhere
sure.
in the world.
Yeah, sure. So as the factory, we built our own factory with help from the Commonwealth Government of Australia. Were kind and issued us with a nice grant under their Manufacturing Modernisation Fund. And when we had some investors, we got a cornerstone investor, Peter McKee, shout out to Peter, highly supportive. And we built the factory, but we weren't setting out to be manufacturers, by the way. We just were beekeepers. We just wanted what's best for our bees. But we tried to outsource the manufacturing. We tried to get someone else who specialises in EPS to manufacture, but we just couldn't achieve the outcome that we wanted in terms of quality, being fusion strength, density, price point.
You want control over the quality.
And also supply.
Yes.
So when beekeepers need beehives, commercial beekeepers especially, often they don't plan ahead and they say, we need 1,000 supers, and they need them fast. And so all those reasons, we ended up deciding as a company to build our own factory in Australia. So it's a modern, high-tech facility. We imported the equipment from Germany, and so we turn out a product we're really proud of. It's very high quality and great for the bees. And so that's kind of the factory. That's the
So you have a series of different molds that can be snapped or bolted in place for the different infusers.
That's
So,
right.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So you make a variety. It's not simply these boxes and lids, but you're making other kinds of equipment for beekeepers as well.
We right now we make the hive base, the bodies, the different size bodies, the hive top, but we have a whole raft of new innovations on the roadmap that we're developing, testing, like our Queen Castle system, nucleus hive systems.
Yes.
That we will be moulding in the coming
Yes. And
months.
a lot of people who are really curious about the variety of equipment that you're producing and selling can go to the Hive, HIVE, IQ, all one word, .com.
.com if you're in North America,
Yeah.
US especially, or .com.au for Australia.
Okay, .com.au if you're in Australia listening to us. And from there, you've got pictures and information about this
the hives.
wide variety of
Yes.
types of equipment. So all manufactured in your hometown or the place
Yes.
that you're set up, Mitchell, Australia?
Mitchell, which is in the city of Canberra,
Okay.
which is Australia's capital city.
Yeah.
So that we have a facility there where you're
And you
welcome.
test-
Anybody out there that wants to come and visit our factory, the coffee pot's always on, and we enjoy giving tours and showing you what we do. So please drop in.
Okay, is it wheelchair accessible? It is. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, and if it's not, you're going to push me around places.
We will.
I think I'd love to see that. I'm
We're gonna-
really excited about this product. This is something that I think we would really.
I was going to say, we're going to have to come down to Australia and then film a podcast there with you, Victor.
Absolutely, you can come out on the bees. We run 1,500 hives, so I have 2 companies now. With the Hive IQ is obviously we set up as a manufacturing company, but
So when you get an idea, you can run out to the field and just try it and say, well,
Yeah.
maybe it's better that we do have an open entrance on the top. Let's just do a few.
Yeah.
And you've already done that, and you know
Yes.
the results of that.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
this is important.
and my son Xavier runs the factory. He's anaphylactic, so he can't be a beekeeper.
Oh,
so he
that's-
runs
yeah.
he runs the factory and the company in Australia. And my daughter Sophia runs the beekeeping business with my brother and my business partner Dave. So she's our operations manager.
Now, I don't know if it's convenient or unfortunate that you're apoplectic in a beekeeping family.
Right.
Oh, that happens a lot, and
But-
and no, it's really rather common for somebody to have severe allergies to bees.
Right.
When they grow up in a beekeeping family, I hear
Yeah.
of that an awful lot.
Yeah.
But at least he's got a role that he's connected and sees what's going on, and I think that's pretty cool that he's running the factory for you guys. That's really great.
Are we able to talk about the name a little bit, Hive IQ? Where's that coming from?
I guess it comes from the idea that we want to put the IQ into the beehive, the smarts, make it a more intelligent, scientific-based design. So it's the IQ is kind of like the Einstein part, we want to put the IQ back into the beehive. And it evolved because the beehive hasn't evolved really a lot since the 1850s.
And with the idea of intelligence and IQ, you have sensory equipment that can go
Yes.
into these as well. Can you describe that a little bit?
Yeah, so we've been using sensors in our hives for quite a long time, our own production hives in Australia. So we have temperature, humidity, microphone in the hives, and that gives us a lot of information remotely in real time. So we have satellite communications when we're in remote locations. And then we have hive scales on there, and the hive scales gives us an incredible amount of information about what's happening out there in the field. It tells us when we need to be, out there harvesting.
And all these add-ons can be paired with this.
Yes, so we're in the process of commercializing those products. So they'll be coming in next year, this coming year, 2025. So watch for those products. So we will be offering those soon.
And did the IQ come before that idea of you would get into sensories and stuff like that, or were you guys thinking, hey, we're eventually going to go into
No, it's
smart
something that was
technology?
part of our entire thinking. Is we wanted to build I guess it's kind of like the Milwaukee or DeWalt system for tools. Like we wanted a system that just worked together.
Right.
So everything just interoperates and works together to empower beekeepers, because we became really obsessed with For Healthy Bees is our company,
Right.
our company mantra, that's our purpose, is for healthy bees, but it's also for healthy and profitable beekeepers. And
That's-
the beekeepers are struggling. So we thought we need to develop technology and a system that empowers beekeepers to keep healthier, more productive colonies in a world where, we've got adulterated honey flooding the market. Consumers are being ripped off because they're going into the stores to buy honey. And so our whole system is designed to empower beekeepers.
No, that's a very good way to approach it, because just to kind of go back to the Milwaukee thing, I think they came on the market just maybe 15, 20 years ago at a very high quality, durable product, but at a very competitive price.
Exactly.
And
yes.
they just, they're now
And everything,
everybody's.
and you buy one piece of equipment and it works with the other piece, and
Right.
it just goes together, and it's not a piecemeal approach. It's an integrated system.
No, I really like it. Ron, I don't know how much, do you have more I have one kind of, it'll be like a 5-minute answer I think you're probably going to give.
Well,
but
let's hear it then. Go ahead, Bidzina.
Well, no, I have a question.
Mhm.
Okay. Are we able to talk about a little bit of history of beekeeping in Australia. Maybe could you touch on that and
Yeah, sure.
when it started and when did bees come over? And I don't know if
Yeah, so European honeybees arrived in Australia in, I think, around 1820s, I think. Just don't quote me on the exact year, but on a ship called Isabella.
wow.
Yeah.
Do you know for what purpose?
I think the early European, UK settlers were wanting honey.
Okay.
And so they somehow managed to ship hives across the ocean on ships over months. You imagine trying to keep hives alive
Right.
on that journey back in the 1800s, and got them to Australia, and that's kind of the start of
Maybe
Europe.
the candles as well, possibly.
Yeah,
beeswax.
Beeswax. So the European settlers, and they brought other things with them. They brought rabbits, they brought foxes.
Okay, I see.
So
Yeah.
because they wanted
If
to
we're
have
going to
their
destroy a continent, let's go all out.
we like our fox hunting, so let's bring some foxes, and they destroy our wild. Yeah, anyway, but European honeybees arrived in the 1800s, and they've become really, really very much a part of our industry, our culture.
There's no native honeybees in Australia?
Yes,
Or like
yes,
Asian-
there's several hundred species.
Oh, but they're honeybees, not bees.
They're not honeybees. Well, some of them do produce honey, but they're not a commercially viable insect. Some of them, a lot of them are solitary insects, and some of them do have a colony, but they produce very small amounts of honey. Those colonies.
The Asian honeybee is not in Australia, or was not prior.
It
Apis
wasn't.
cerana?
Yeah.
Wasn't until recently.
Huh.
So
Oh.
Has it jumped across now?
yes,
from,
it has. Yes. So
Papua New
unfortunately,
Guinea?
now we have Asian honeybees arrived into Cairns on a container ship somehow.
And they've brought varroa.
They
with
jumped
them.
off a container ship, and we had this huge mammoth effort. Beekeepers volunteered from around Australia and went to Cairns, and we were trying to hunt down these things. But unfortunately, in Cairns, where they arrived, it's very rainforest.
Yeah.
It's the rainforest part of Australia.
Yeah.
It's impossible, to find these critters. So it's become endemic now in the northern part of Australia.
Huh. Sorry, I thought that there was the Asian honeybee was native to Australia, and so European honeybees were brought to Australia in the 1800s,
Right.
and then that's kind of the history onwards.
Yeah, that's right. And
For commercial beekeeping.
Yeah. So I think Australia globally ranks somewhere around the top 10 or just outside the top 10 for honey production. There's about registered in Australia, we were looking at this yesterday, there's about 673,000 hives registered. So there's probably over 1 million, but not everybody registers
Right.
hives. But it is a big
In
industry.
all of Australia.
Yeah, and pollination is important. So Australia is number 2 in the world for I believe, for almond growing. And so we have a fairly large almond pollination
there's
migration.
almond, okay.
So we ship several hundred thousand, I think it's about 700,000 of our hives end up on the almonds every year, pollinating our almonds down in Victoria and southern New South Wales.
That's similar to the United States. It sounds like almost every colony in Australia ends up in almonds for at least a little while.
It's a very big part of a commercial beekeeper's business is the almond
You
pollination.
said it could be close to 700,000
I believe
colonies?
don't quote me on it, but I think it's
Yes.
around 700,000 colonies arrive in the almonds every year.
Right, so
Yeah.
that's really grown. That
Right.
is,
And the thing with almonds, the flowering time of the year is awkward for beekeeping or honeybees because it's the last month of winter in August in Australia, which is our last month.
Yeah.
And we need colonies of a certain strength. And that's also another benefit of our insulated hives is we're able to take very strong, healthy colonies to the almonds with an insulated hive.
Yeah, we're just about over an hour. So I don't know. We could chat for another half an hour and 2 hours, whatever you guys like.
Well, what I'd
If
like
you've-
to do is just mention my dealer here in
yeah.
Calgary.
Yeah.
So we're here in Rob's store, Rob and Christie's store, a magnificent store here in Calgary, and they're now carrying our stock as of a few weeks ago here. So beekeepers in Canada can come here and collect their hives and get a lot of beekeeping support and knowledge. They run training and all sorts of stuff. So it's a great resource here to come and visit the store in Calgary.
And then it's called Worker and Hive.
Worker and Hive.
In Calgary, and they have an online presence, so
Yes.
anyone listening can look it up. But we will add a link to Worker and Hive as well as a link to Hive IQ, so
Right.
that people can just go into the show notes for our podcast and
Right.
YouTube shows and be able to jump
Yes.
into your world
Yes.
pretty easily.
And if you're in the US, we've got a lot of reseller dealers in the US. So you just need to go to our website, click on the Buy Local page, and find your nearest outlet if you're a hobbyist.
And it's HiveIQ.com or
HiveIQ.com.
.com. And I think Worker and Hive is the same as well.
Yeah, and if you're in Australia, it's HiveIQ.com.au.
Okay. HiveIQ.au for Australia. For North America, HiveIQ.com.
Right.
Well, this is a beautiful idea. I'm glad to see that you were able to bring it to fruition with your own factory, so you've got control. You also over the quality of the product, and you've also got 1,500 colonies of bees in the back 40 that you can test everything on. So you know what you're selling, and you know that it works, and it's a route to go. Now, I've been using the bigger, clunkier boxes that are also EPS, but they're not built anywhere near this grade of quality. And one reason I went to the insulated box was partly on Robert McBain's advice, the main proprietor here of Worker and Hive, was because he told me that I would really love the boxes, particularly in our early spring, because they retain the heat and the brood nest can expand better. And I've certainly noticed that. They certainly have that advantage. I may be switching over to this style because it just is a little hardier, and mine are starting to fall apart. Now, before we end, I want to know whether or not we need to buy an entire different style and set of frames to go in, or if a standard frame, wooden frame or plastic frame that would be made for a Langstroth hive is going to fit into this right now.
Your standard Langstroth frames, whether they're plastic or wood, will fit straight in.
Fantastic. That's what I wanted to hear.
Yes.
That sounds really great. Okay, so we'd be buying the insulation units. You don't have to worry about wrapping. That was my other motivation for going to an EPS type product. I got mine out of from
wrapping.
Wrapping. I hated wrapping. When I had 1,000 colonies of bees, and I would be working alone, and the wind would be blowing and howling over the Saskatchewan prairies, and there'd be a bit of snow, and I'm trying to hold down the insulation and pull the wrapping material around. I just love this idea.
Yeah, and
so here we go.
And so once you're coming into spring and you take the wrap off, and then you get another cold snap.
That's right. That's right.
Your bees are clustered again.
Mm-hmm.
So they go from being warm to clustered, really quickly here in this climate. I understand.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I just love all the details. It's designed for a beekeeper. It's got these deep handles, beveled edges. Just because all these small things over and over again, when you're doing it, it really takes a damage and toll on your, and just takes the fun away from beekeeping. And so I really love that. Just looking at it, I want to put a beehive in there. This is like perfectly aligned. I don't have to fuss about the boxes. I don't know. It just makes me want to start beekeeping. Just right, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
it's very inviting.
Yeah, yes.
It is. Great idea. Great product.
But I guess one point I meant to make here is, as a commercial beekeeper, I was quite selfish about when we designed this. I designed it for commercial. Everything we did was for commercial, but as it turns out, it's a beautiful, perfect hive for hobbyists and sideliners, because it's lighter because of one less frame, so it's a little bit lighter to manage for hobbyists and elderly people, young people. Women, we have my daughter's 22 and she's running a beekeeping business, but she's not very large, so that extra weight gain is really great, and it just empowers people that can lift the boxes compared to a wooden box, which is heavy.
Well, I can't wait to see your next series of ideas. And I'm going to make one very small suggestion, because our podcast is about bees, and that means more than just honeybees. but I can see you in the future creating boxes and equipment that enthusiasts of native wild bees would be able to use. Like, I can see bumblebees nesting in something like this. Now, you don't have bumblebees in Australia, but you have a lot of other kinds of bees.
Yeah, the native bees, we
Yes.
have a lot of people that will keep them.
Yes, yes.
And they usually make they're tiny little hives, but they
Right.
make them out of wood. And so we've been talking to a lot of those folk about how we could mold a
Good,
hive.
good. Exactly the point I was trying to drive at. That
Right.
sounds great. That sounds great, along with these honeybee hives for people who need to produce honey and do vast amounts of pollination and move these things in and out of the almond orchards without too much extra effort. A little lighter weight, save some fuel on those trucks and on the Bobcat for lifting and moving.
Right.
And great product. And I would say some of our listeners are going to be wondering about the advantages and disadvantages of plastics, as they would call this, over wood. But I think if the product lasts longer and if it's recyclable, which I think EPS is, isn't it?
It is
you could-
recycling. Actually, I was at a recycling plant here right in Calgary yesterday with the president, getting a tour of there, and he was showing us, his machinery that shreds the
This type of plastic, this hard.
and then so that can be injected back into the molded product at a percentage. And then the other cool thing is anything that's they're not able to inject in because perhaps it's a little dirty or something like that. They melt it down and it becomes a really solid resin, and then they ship that to companies that make different products out of it. So it's a very recyclable product.
Good. I wanted to kind of end on that note. If people people will be interested after listening to you and watching these pictures, and so it's HiveIQ, all one word, .com is where most people can access it. And we wish you a lot of luck. We appreciate that you're here. Was there anything else you wanted to end on? Anything extra that?
Well, I travel a lot, so if there's any beekeepers out there, commercial beekeepers especially, that would be welcome, would have me for a guest for an hour or two, I'd love to drop in and see your operation and learn how you guys keep bees in different parts of the world and show you our hives, get feedback. If you're in Australia and you're anywhere near Canberra, the coffee pot is always on, and we love visitors, so please come and visit us in Australia.
How far from Sydney?
It's about 2 hours.
About 2 hours by car.
Yeah, 2 hours south.
Okay.
Southwest.
All right. It's a deal. I'm going to go. I hope other people will show up with me. Okay.
Fantastic.
Betzina, did you have anything you wanted to end on?
I just want to say thank you, Victor, for taking time to record this podcast.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me on the show. I really, it's a great show. I love the humor you guys managed to put in there, and it's fantastic to be a part of it.
Well, it's gonna get more humorous, so stick around. But you're coming from all the way from Australia, and you got lots of traveling to do. I mean, you were just in Edmonton, 3 hours away, and we got this crazy snowfall on Monday, where it's probably almost 4 or 5 inches.
Oh, there's 10 centimeters out there for sure.
Yeah.
This is a novelty for me. My wife and is traveling with me, and we go, wow, we come out of the hotel this morning, and this is beautiful.
Yeah, right. It's beautiful,
like a
but
winter
you're
wonderland.
leaving like in hours, right? You're going to get out of here. We're not. We're stuck here for months.
It is nice for like this initial stage, but then it gets slushy, and then you get a little tired of it. But
Again, Victor, thank you so much. Appreciate you coming in and taking the time to do this. And Betzina, you want to drive us home?
Yes, thank you, Victor. And I just want to say thank you, Worker and Hive, Robert, for hosting us, for your hospitality. It's been wonderful, and I hope we can be back soon one day. Thank you.
Look forward to it. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.